$1 million bail, Judge Edward Whitmore roared as his gavel crashed against the bench. That's the price for people who think they're smarter than the system, Miss Williams. Whitmore leaned back, eyes cold with satisfaction. Of course, he added loudly enough for every reporter to hear. If you can't afford it, then perhaps prison is exactly where you belong. Maya Williams felt her throat tighten. For the first time that morning, the calm mask on her face cracked. Your Honor, she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. I didn't traffic drugs. I didn't take any money. Someone set me up. Whitmore looked down at her with open disgust. The transfers were fake. Maya continued quickly. The evidence in my car wasn't mine. Somebody planted it before the arrest. Please, you have to know this case doesn't make sense. Whitmore's face hardened. You expect this court to believe that fantasy? Yes, Maya said. Because it's the truth. Without warning, Whitmore grabbed the thick case file from his bench and hurled it across the courtroom. The folder slammed into Maya's face. The sharp metal corner clipped her cheekbone, and a gasp burst through the room as loose papers scattered across the polished floor. Maya staggered sideways. A thin cut opened beneath her eye, and blood began running down her cheek. For one heavy second, nobody moved. Whitmore stared at Maya, as if watching something beneath him struggle to stand. People like you always beg for sympathy the moment consequences arrive, he said coldly. Maya touched her cheek. Her fingertips came away red. You're making a mistake, she whispered. Whitmore stood from the bench, and the atmosphere changed at once. Judges did not step down during hearings unless something had gone terribly wrong. But Edward Whitmore no longer seemed interested in appearances. He picked up the red ink stamp from beside the clerk's station, the heavy seal used for official detention orders. Dark crimson ink glistened across its surface as he descended the steps from the bench, one slow step at a time, until he stood directly in front of Maya. The older deputy marshal beside her shifted uneasily. Your Honor, Whitmore ignored him. Maya held her ground, despite the blood running down her face. Whitmore looked at the wound almost thoughtfully. Then, without warning, he grabbed Maya's jaw hard with one hand and pressed the ink stamp directly against the cut on her cheek. Maya gasped in pain. Red ink mixed instantly with blood. The courtroom erupted with shocked voices. Someone cursed under his breath. Another person whispered, "What is he doing?" A clerk half rose from her seat, then froze. Whitmore leaned close enough for Maya to smell coffee on his breath. You know what people like you are inside this system? He said quietly, viciously. Inventory. He held the stamp there for another second before releasing her. Maya stumbled back. A crimson smear now marked the side of her face like a brand. Whitmore turned toward the courtroom, his voice rising. The media loves turning criminals into martyrs. But underneath the headlines, underneath the politics, underneath the outrage, people like this are processed exactly the same way. Every shipment is processed, moved, contained, stored, and eventually forgotten. The silence afterward felt poisonous. Maya's breathing had turned uneven, but she refused to wipe the blood and ink from her face. Whitmore noticed, and it seemed to anger him even more. You pushed this hearing up 24 hours ahead of schedule, Maya said through the pain. You denied reassignment requests. You sealed financial discovery before my attorney reviewed it. Whitmore's jaw tightened. That's not procedure, Maya said. That's panic. One legal reporter near the front slowly lowered his pen. The prosecutor at the government table looked pale. Whitmore climbed back toward the bench with controlled fury. You should be very careful accusing a judge of misconduct, and you should have been more careful hiding your prison money. The sentence detonated across the courtroom. Whispers exploded from every corner. Whitmore slammed his palm against the bench. Order, but Maya saw it now. For the first time since the hearing began, something flashed behind his eyes, quick and unmistakable before he buried it under anger. Fear. You were caught with classified files tied to an active prison corruption inquiry, he snapped. You received illegal offshore payments. You possessed narcotics evidence connected to a trafficking operation. I was looking at your contracts, Maya fired back. That's why this is happening. Whitmore laughed sharply, but the sound carried strain now. You actually think anyone is going to believe that? Look at you. No money, no influence, no one coming through those doors to save you. Maya stared at him through the blood and red ink. I think you're terrified someone will. The silence that followed lasted just long enough for the room to understand what had changed. Whitmore had walked into the hearing believing Maya was just another frightened black woman he could crush beneath paperwork, bail orders, and public shame. But now he was beginning to sense something he could not yet name. Maya was not begging anymore. Whitmore grabbed the bail order and signed it violently enough to crease the page. Bail remains at $1 million. Defendant is remanded into custody immediately. The gavel crashed down again. 2 deputy marshals approached Maya carefully, almost ashamed to touch her after what they had just witnessed. As they turned her toward the courtroom exit, Whitmore delivered one final insult. You should have learned something today, Miss Williams. Justice isn't free. Maya slowly turned her head back toward him. Blood still rolled beneath the red stain across her cheek, but her voice no longer shook. No, she said quietly. But corruption always leaves fingerprints. Whitmore's expression froze. Across the prosecution table, Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Monroe stared at the blood on Maya's face with visible horror. Not confidence, not satisfaction, but fear. Then Rachel slowly looked up. Their eyes met for one brief second. Rachel gave the smallest possible shake of her head, as if she had finally realized the truth Maya already knew. This case had never been about drugs. It had always been about burying the woman who got too close to the system's secrets. The deputy marshals led Maya Williams through the side door, while the courtroom behind her remained frozen in the kind of silence that follows something no one knows how to report honestly. The hallway smelled of floor polish, wet wool coats, and old paper. A fluorescent light flickered above the marshal's desk as if even the building itself was struggling to keep its composure. Maya walked without resisting. The blood and red ink on her cheek had begun to dry into a dark smear, tightening the skin beneath her eye. Every step made the cuffs tug against her wrists, but she kept her shoulders square. One marshal, a broad man in his late 50s with gray at his temples, glanced at her once and looked away. You need medical? He asked quietly. Maya did not answer right away. She looked down the corridor toward the elevators, where 2 younger officers stood pretending not to stare. No, she said. I need that courtroom preserved. The marshal frowned. Ma'am? The cameras, the audio, the clerk's notes, the stamp he used, the file he threw. Her voice stayed low. All of it. The marshal stared at her for half a second longer than he should have. Something in her tone did not match the woman Whitmore had just tried to reduce to a frightened defendant. It was not panic. It was procedure. Then the younger marshal on her other side tightened his hand on her elbow. Keep moving. They took her down 1 level to the holding area beneath the courthouse. The air changed immediately. It grew colder, flatter, stripped of the polished dignity of the floors above. Metal doors replaced oak. Benches replaced chairs. The law always looked different underground. Inside the holding room, a vending machine hummed beside a scarred table. A television mounted high in the corner played local news with the volume muted. Maya saw her own face appear on the screen for 3 seconds, caught from some terrible angle as she was escorted out of court with blood on her cheek. The headline beneath it read, Accused, drug-linked defendant, clashes with judge. She almost laughed. Drug-linked. That was how they did it. Not guilty, not innocent, not proven, just linked. A word designed to stain without committing to facts. If you feel the pain of being judged before the truth is heard, please hit the like button for Maya and tell us in the comments where you are watching from, because someone near you might be watching this same story right now, feeling the same anger, the same hope, and the same need for justice. Then subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens when Maya finally turns the truth against the judge who tried to bury her. The marshal unlocked one cuff and fastened the other to the metal ring bolted into the table. You sure about medical? He asked again. Maya looked at him this time. What's your name? He hesitated. Deputy Marshal Alan Reed. Deputy Reed, I'm going to ask you one question, and I'm only asking because you seem like a man old enough to remember when people still cared about chain of custody. His face tightened, but he did not interrupt. Did anyone bag that stamp? Reed held her gaze. I don't know. Find out. You're in no position to give orders. No, Maya said. But I'm in an excellent position to remember who ignored evidence after a federal judge assaulted a restrained woman in open court. Reed looked toward the closed door. His jaw shifted once. Then he walked out without another word. Maya sat alone. Only then did she let herself breathe. Not fully. Not emotionally. Just enough to keep her hands from shaking. She had known Whitmore was arrogant. She had known he was protected. But what happened in that courtroom was not strategy. It was rage. The kind of rage that leaks out when a powerful man realizes the person standing in front of him is not as helpless as he assumed. That mattered. Rage made men loud. Loud men made records. Maya closed her eyes and rebuilt the morning in sequence. The bail order had been prepared before argument. The case file had been sitting on Whitmore's right side, not with the clerk. The red stamp had been uncapped before he ever stepped down. Rachel Monroe had looked afraid before the file hit Maya's face. Not after. So Rachel knew something. Maybe not everything, but enough. The door opened again. This time, it was not Reed. A woman entered in a dark wool coat, rain still shining on the shoulders. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Monroe carried a legal folder against her chest like it had suddenly become heavier than paper had any right to be. Maya opened her eyes. Rachel stopped just inside the door. They told me I had 5 minutes. Maya glanced at the camera in the corner. Then use 4 carefully. Rachel's face tightened at the sight of Maya's cheek. I didn't know he would do that. But you knew something was wrong. Rachel looked toward the door, then lowered her voice. I reviewed the arrest packet at midnight. It wasn't the same packet I saw this morning. Maya stayed still. Rachel took 1 step closer. The warrant return changed. The timestamp on the vehicle search moved by 11 minutes. The asset seizure form had a supplemental page added after upload. Who added it? That's the problem, Rachel said. The system shows my credentials. Maya studied her carefully. Did you do it? Rachel's mouth tightened. No. Can you prove that? Not yet. There it was again. The same phrase Maya had thrown at Whitmore upstairs. Not yet. The most dangerous words in any courtroom. Rachel set the folder on the table but kept one hand on it. You need to understand something. Officially, I cannot help you. Then, unofficially? Rachel swallowed. Unofficially, someone wanted me tied to your evidence chain. If this collapses, I go down with it. Maya leaned back slightly, the cuff chain scraping the metal ring. Now we're having an honest conversation. Rachel opened the folder. Inside was a photocopy of a custody log, marked with yellow tabs and handwritten notes. She turned it toward Maya. This is the intake record for the hard drive supposedly found in your car. Evidence tech signed it at 8:42 p.m. Maya looked at the line. I was arrested at 8:51. Rachel nodded. For the first time that day, Maya felt something colder and sharper than anger move through her. Confirmation. Who caught it? Maya asked. I did. Why? Rachel hesitated. Because I'm good at my job. Maya almost smiled. That's inconvenient for somebody. Rachel closed the folder again. There's more. The judge requested assignment to your bail hearing before your case number was generated. That landed harder. Maya looked up slowly. Say that again. Whitmore asked for the case before the court officially had it. The vending machine hummed into the silence. Maya's thoughts moved quickly now, clean and precise, despite the pain in her face. Whitmore had not merely taken advantage of the arrest. He had been waiting for it. That meant the trap had been built with court access, prosecutorial access, and likely law enforcement support. Not a single bad actor. A network. Rachel watched her process it. Who are you really, Maya? The question hung between them. Maya did not answer immediately. Letting people underestimate her had kept her alive more than once. Upstairs, Whitmore had looked at her and seen what he wanted to see. A black woman with no money, no power, no escape. He had not seen the years behind her eyes. He had not seen the audits, the sealed subpoenas, the financial maps, the prison contracts cross-referenced by county and judge. And for now, maybe that ignorance was useful. Maya looked at Rachel and said only, I'm the woman he should have left alone. Before Rachel could respond, the door opened. Deputy Reed stepped in, holding a clear evidence bag. Inside was the red stamp. He placed it on the table without looking at either woman. Clerk bagged it. Cameras are being copied. Maya nodded once. Thank you. Reed paused at the door. For what it's worth, Miss Williams, a lot of people upstairs looked sick after you left. Maya touched the edge of the drying blood on her cheek. Good. That means some of them are still alive inside. When the door closed again, Rachel slid the folder closer. I can't make this disappear, she said. I'm not asking you to. What are you asking? Maya looked at the custody log, then at the sealed hallway beyond the holding room, then up toward the courthouse above them where Edward Whitmore was probably already telling himself he had won. Find out who touched this file before you did, Maya said. Every login, every edit, every deleted access point. Rachel nodded slowly. And you? Maya's eyes hardened. I'm going to find out why a judge was willing to bleed in public over a prison contract. By late afternoon, the rain had turned Chicago, the color of old steel. Maya Williams was transferred from the courthouse holding room to the federal detention intake wing in a white transport van with no markings on the side. The vehicle smelled of vinyl, diesel, and disinfectant. The windows were blacked out, but she could feel the turns in her body. East toward the lake, then south, then a long stretch of stop-and-go traffic where the van idled beside commuters who had no idea a woman with blood and red ink on her face was sitting 3 feet away behind reinforced glass. The younger marshal rode in front and said nothing. Deputy Reed sat across from Maya in the back, one hand resting near the radio, his eyes fixed mostly on the floor. You got family to call? He asked. After 10 minutes, Maya looked at him. Standard intake question, he said. No. Attorney? Not yet. That made him look up. You stood in federal court on $1 million bail order without counsel? I had counsel assigned. Where was he? Late, Maya said. Reed understood enough not to ask the next question. The van stopped at a red light. Through a narrow gap in the partition, Maya caught the faint reflection of her own face in the darkened glass. The stamped red smear had dried over the cut on her cheek. It looked less like blood now and more like some official mark, the kind bureaucracies used on files before they disappeared into storage. Processed, moved, contained, stored. Whitmore's words had been chosen too easily. Not invented in anger, she thought, but repeated from belief. That was the part that stayed with her. When they reached intake, the building swallowed her without ceremony. A garage door opened, the van rolled inside, and fluorescent light replaced the gray afternoon. The air carried the dead chill of concrete. A female intake officer in her 50s glanced at Maya's face, then looked down at the paperwork, then back at her face. Medical, she said immediately. I'm fine. That wasn't a question. Maya sat through the exam in a small room with beige walls and a metal stool bolted to the floor. A physician's assistant cleaned the cut on her cheek while trying very hard not to ask what happened. Maya appreciated the restraint. Older professionals understood that sometimes dignity meant not forcing someone to narrate their own humiliation before they were ready. The woman taped a small bandage beneath Maya's eye. You may have a scar. Maya met her reflection in the small, scratched mirror above the sink. I already had a few. The woman's expression softened, but she said nothing. After intake, they gave Maya a gray sweatshirt, gray pants, socks, and shoes with no laces. Her suit was taken, folded badly, and sealed in a property bag. Her watch, phone, earrings, and wallet were inventoried under a number instead of a name. Maya watched each item disappear into plastic and felt the old truth of custody settle around her. The first thing confinement takes is not freedom. It takes evidence that you existed outside it. They placed her in a temporary holding cell with a steel bench and a toilet half shielded by a short partition. A ceiling camera watched from the corner. Somewhere down the corridor, a man coughed for several minutes, then stopped. A guard laughed at something on his phone. Doors buzzed open and shut with the exhausted rhythm of an institution designed to outlast everyone inside it. Maya sat on the bench and reconstructed the trap again. The fake wire transfer had appeared in an account she used only for household expenses. That meant whoever framed her knew where to place money, so it looked secret but not professionally hidden. Amateur enough to embarrass her, clean enough to indict her. The hard drive had been found under the passenger seat of her car, not in the trunk, not locked away. Under the passenger seat, where any patrol officer could claim plain view proximity after a stop. Too convenient. The narcotics evidence was uglier. A sealed bag connected to a trafficking operation she had never touched, logged into an evidence facility 2 counties away, somehow discovered in her vehicle 12 hours later. That required more than a corrupt judge. That required badge access. And the witness statement. That bothered her most. A confidential informant had claimed Maya accepted cash at a hotel bar near Avher. The problem was not that the statement was false. False statements were easy. The problem was that the hotel bar had been chosen carefully. Maya had been there 3 weeks earlier, meeting someone under a different pretext. A meeting she had never logged officially because she had not yet trusted the information. Someone had been watching her before the case turned. A guard appeared at the cell door just after 6 p.m. Williams. Attorney visit. Maya rose slowly. Name? The guard checked the clipboard. Public defender. Leonard Voss. Maya almost said no. Then she decided she needed to see what kind of lawyer Whitmore's machine had placed in front of her. They walked her to a small interview room, divided by scratched plexiglass. Leonard Voss was already seated on the other side. He was in his early 60s, tired around the eyes, with a brown briefcase that had seen better decades. His tie was loosened, his hair damp from rain, and his expression carried the particular resignation of a man who had spent too much of his career negotiating with systems that never negotiated in good faith. He picked up the phone. Maya picked up hers. Miss Williams, he said. I'm Leonard Voss. I was appointed this morning. You missed the hearing. His face tightened. I was told the hearing was at 3. It was moved to 10. I know that now. Maya studied him. Who told you 3? Voss hesitated. That hesitation is an answer, Maya said. He exhaled through his nose. The clerk's office. Which clerk? I don't know yet. Find out. Voss gave her a weary look. Miss Williams, I understand you're angry, but my first job is to keep you from making this worse. My first job is figuring out who built the cage. He leaned back slightly. You talk like someone who doesn't plan to take a plea. Do innocent people usually take pleas in your experience, Mr. Voss? His eyes changed. Just a fraction. In my experience, innocent people take pleas every day when the alternative is being crushed slowly. The honesty was unexpected. Maya lowered her voice. Did you see what happened in court? I saw enough. And Judge Whitmore committed career suicide if anyone in authority chooses to call it that. If, Maya repeated. Voss nodded once. That's the word that keeps America running. For the first time since the courthouse, Maya allowed herself the smallest breath of something almost like approval. Voss was tired, but he was not stupid. Better yet, he was not pretending the room was clean. He opened his briefcase and removed a thin folder. A man came to my office 20 minutes before I left. Said he knew you. Said I should give you this, if I was allowed in. Maya's body went still. What man? Older. Black overcoat. White beard. Walked with a cane but didn't need it as much as he wanted people to think. Voss looked at her carefully. He said his name was Victor Hayes. Maya said nothing, but the name settled into the room, like an unlocked door. Voss slid a single page through the document slot beneath the plexiglass. It was not a letter. It was a photocopy of a prison occupancy report from North River Correctional Holdings, one of the private companies Maya had been tracking. 3 figures were circled in black ink: projected detainee intake, judicial detention orders, and quarterly revenue variance. At the bottom, someone had written one sentence by hand. Ask why Whitmore knew the bed count before the arrests. Maya read it twice, then a third time. Voss watched her face. Does that mean something? It means the bail hearings weren't responding to crime, Maya said quietly. They were feeding contracts. Voss went pale enough that his age showed plainly. You can prove that? Not from this. Then what do you need? Maya folded the page once, and looked at him through the scratched plexiglass. "I need you to stop acting like my job is to survive this case." He frowned. "What is your job?" "To make sure it survives me." The phone line crackled softly between them. Voss looked down at the folder, then back at Maya. "There's one more thing." "What?" "The man, Hayes, told me not to trust any file delivered through official channels after noon today." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Why noon?" Voss shook his head. He didn't say. Maya looked toward the camera in the corner of the room. A detention camera, fixed and indifferent. Then she looked back at Voss. "Because by noon," she said, "they started replacing the real case with the one they want everyone to remember." A knock struck the interview room door. The guard opened it. "Time." Voss gathered his papers reluctantly. "Miss Williams, I can file an emergency motion on the assault in court. I can challenge bail. I can request reassignment." "You can do all three," Maya said. "And you can assume every motion will be read by Whitmore before it reaches anyone honest." "That leaves us where?" Maya slid Victor's page back through the slot. "It leaves us with the thing they're afraid of." Voss took the page. "Which is?" "A record they didn't write." The guard opened Maya's side door. As she stood, Voss leaned closer to the glass. "Miss Williams," he said, "who exactly are you?" Maya paused with one cuff already back around her wrist. For a moment, she thought of giving him the simple answer, the one Whitmore believed, the one the news had already sold to the public. A defendant, a disgraced woman, a criminal defendant with blood on her cheek and $1 million price tag on her freedom. Instead, she looked at Voss and said, "For now I'm bait." The guard pulled her into the corridor. Behind her, Leonard Voss remained seated with Victor Hayes's page in his hand, staring at the circled numbers as if they had just turned into a map of a buried city. That night, Maya lay awake on the steel bench under the cold fluorescent light, listening to doors lock and unlock along the corridor. She did not sleep. Sleep belonged to people whose enemies were finished working. At 2:13 a.m., far above her, somewhere in the sealed machinery of the federal court system, a login credential belonging to Rachel Monroe accessed the case file again. 7 documents disappeared. 3 new ones appeared, and 1 old file, buried under a name nobody in Whitmore's circle had searched in years, was opened for the first time since Victor Hayes had been forced out of the bureau. By morning, the story had already changed twice. At 6 o'clock, the local stations called Maya Williams a disgraced defendant accused of drug trafficking and evidence tampering. By 7:30, one cable panel had upgraded the language to suspected corruption figure. By 8, Judge Edward Whitmore's office released a short statement describing the previous day's courtroom incident as an unfortunate misunderstanding during a highly volatile proceeding. No one in the statement mentioned the file thrown at Maya's face. No one mentioned the red stamp. No one mentioned blood. In the detention wing, Maya watched the muted television from behind reinforced glass, while 3 women in gray uniforms sat along the opposite wall waiting for transport. She could not hear the anchors, but she could read the captions well enough. "Whitmore defends strict bail order in high-profile drug case." Maya looked away. That was the first rule of public destruction. Whoever named the story first usually owned it. A guard appeared at the cell door just after 9. "Williams, legal visit." "Voss?" Maya asked. The guard checked his clipboard. "Hayes." Maya's face gave nothing away, but something in her chest tightened. They cuffed her and walked her through 2 secured doors into the attorney visitation corridor. It was colder than the cell block, with white-painted cinder block walls and a row of interview rooms that smelled faintly of bleach and stale coffee. The guard opened the 3rd door. Victor Hayes sat on the far side of the metal table. He was older than Maya expected, and exactly as dangerous as she had imagined. Early 60s, broad shoulders gone slightly heavy with age, a white beard trimmed close, dark overcoat folded neatly over the chair beside him. A cane rested against the wall within reach, but his posture said he used it mostly to make impatient people underestimate him. His eyes were the most telling thing. Calm, tired, and alert in the way of men who had spent their lives reading exits before conversations began. The guard locked Maya's cuff chain to the table ring and stepped outside. Victor looked at the bandage beneath her eye. He always did enjoy leaving a signature. Maya sat across from him. That sounds personal. It is. Then start there. Victor leaned back. No greeting? You sent a prison occupancy report through my lawyer after I was framed, assaulted in court, and held on $1 million bail order. I think we've moved past greetings. A slow smile touched his mouth, but it carried no amusement. Fair enough. Maya rested both cuffed hands on the table. Who are you, really? Victor Hayes, retired FBI, Public Corruption Unit, then Civil Rights. Then an early exit that was presented as voluntary because the Bureau enjoys polite language when it's burying embarrassment. Whitmore? Victor nodded. Among others. Maya studied him. How long ago? 9 years. What did you find? Enough to lose my badge. Not enough to take his. The answer landed with the weight of an old defeat. Maya had heard that tone before from honest agents who discovered too late that truth without leverage was just a liability. Victor reached into a worn leather folder and removed a photograph of a courthouse hallway. Grainy and time-stamped. Several suited men stood near a bank of elevators. One of them was younger, but unmistakable. Edward Whitmore, smiling beside a private corrections executive. Maya recognized from financial filings. Victor tapped the executive's face. Daniel Price, North River Correctional Holdings. He doesn't own prisons directly anymore. Men like him stopped putting their names on buildings a long time ago. Now they own management contracts, transport vendors, food service suppliers, medical billing firms, and political nonprofits with clean names. Maya looked at the photo, and Whitmore fed him detainees. Whitmore fed him predictability, Victor said. That's more valuable. Private detention companies don't make serious money from chaos. They make money when they know how many beds will be filled before the bodies arrive. Maya's eyes sharpened. The bed count. That report I sent Voss was one of 6. North River projected increased occupancy before certain bail sweeps happened. Not after. Before. Which means someone in the courts told them what was coming. Or someone in the courts made sure what was coming matched the projection. Maya sat very still. Victor watched her carefully. You were closer than I ever got. That's why they framed me. No, Victor said. They framed you because you were close, and because Whitmore thought you were alone. Maya looked toward the small camera in the corner of the room. Am I? Victor followed her glance. That camera records video only. No audio in attorney rooms. I checked the model on the way in. You always check cameras? I'm retired, not dead. For the first time since the hearing. Maya almost smiled. Victor slid another page across the table. It was a list of case numbers, dates, bail amounts, and sentencing outcomes. Most defendants had received detention orders from Whitmore. Most had entered pleas within 30 days. Most had been moved into facilities connected to North River vendors. All adults, Victor said quietly, as if anticipating the first legal concern. All over 18. All public record until someone started sealing them under administrative review. Maya scanned the names. This is a pattern. It's a machine. Where's the proof of payment? Victor's jaw shifted. That's where it gets difficult. Maya looked up. Difficult is not an answer. The money doesn't go from Price to Whitmore. It goes through donor funds, judicial education retreats, consulting fees to retired clerks, real estate partnerships, and one charitable foundation that supposedly supports court modernization in underserved districts. Supposedly, the foundation owns 3 properties, funds nothing visible, and shares an accountant with a North River subsidiary. Maya leaned back as far as the cuff allowed. That still doesn't put Whitmore's hand on the lever. No, the black file does. The words settled between them. Maya remembered the way Victor had looked in the previous night's security footage described by Voss. A man placing one thin page into motion because he could no longer carry what he knew by himself. What is the black file? She asked. Victor's expression changed. Not fear exactly, but respect for danger. It's what I built before they pushed me out. Financial summaries, sealed docket comparisons, travel records, foundation transfers, internal memoranda, and one recording. Maya's pulse slowed. Recording of who? Victor held her eyes. Whitmore. What does he say? Enough to end his career, if it reaches the right ears. Enough to end his freedom, if we can authenticate the surrounding records. Where is it? Safe. Maya did not look impressed. That's the kind of word men use when they don't trust the person asking. That's exactly why I used it. The door window darkened as someone passed outside. Both of them stopped talking until the shadow moved on. Maya lowered her voice. Why come to me now? Victor's gaze dropped briefly to the bandage on her cheek. Because yesterday, he forgot the cameras were watching. He didn't forget. No, Victor said after a moment. You're right. He believed it wouldn't matter. That's worse, and it may be useful. Maya understood. A man who believed consequences could not reach him did not just make mistakes. He documented his contempt. Victor folded his hands on the table. Listen carefully. Whitmore's people are rewriting your case in real time. By tonight, they'll make the drug evidence look cleaner. By tomorrow, they'll make the wire transfer look older. By next week, half the media will believe you were dirty before you ever walked into that courtroom. Then we don't wait a week. No, Victor said. We make them rush. Rushed men skip steps. Maya looked down at the case list again. Rachel Monroe accessed the file last night. Victor's eyebrows moved slightly. Did she? You didn't know? I hoped. She said her credentials were used to alter the packet. Then she's either compromised or being framed beside you. She looked afraid. Fear can be honest, Victor said. It can also be well rehearsed. Maya nodded once. I'll test her. You won't get many chances from in here. I don't need many. Victor studied her for a long moment. Whitmore thinks you're an ordinary woman who wandered too close to the wrong door. That's useful. It's also temporary. Once he learns what you were really investigating, he won't humiliate you again. He'll erase you quietly. Maya leaned forward. The cuff chain dragged softly across the table. Then give me something he doesn't know I have. Victor reached into his folder and pulled out a small white envelope. He slid it across the table with 2 fingers. Inside was a bank key taped to an index card. No address, no name, just a number written in black ink. Maya looked at it. Safe deposit box? Victor nodded. Not under my name. Whose? A dead accountant who never existed on paper the way he should have. That sounds reassuring. It should sound useful. Maya tucked the envelope beneath the legal pad the guard had left for notes. What's in the box? Not the black file, Victor said. A doorway to it. Before Maya could ask more, the guard knocked and opened the door. Time. Victor stood slowly and took his cane, though Maya noticed again that he barely leaned on it. At the doorway, he turned back. Miss Williams, one more thing. What? Do not try to prove you're innocent first. That's the trap. Maya held his gaze. Victor's voice dropped. Prove why they needed you guilty. The guard let him out. Maya sat alone for several seconds, the envelope hidden beneath her cuffed hands. Somewhere above her, the courthouse machinery kept moving, stamping, filing, sealing, renaming the truth one document at a time. But now, there was a key, and for the first time since Whitmore's gavel came down, Maya knew the cage had a door. Rachel Monroe did not return to her office after the hearing. She went to the records floor instead. The Federal Courthouse Records Division sat 2 levels below the marble lobby, past a security door most attorneys never noticed. It smelled of toner, dust, and coffee that had been reheated too many times. Rachel had worked federal cases long enough to know that truth rarely lived in speeches. It lived in timestamps, access logs, and clerks who remembered details no one thought mattered. She stood at a terminal near the back wall and entered her credentials. The screen loaded Maya Williams's case file. Rachel stared at the first page, then the second, then the third. The arrest packet had changed again. She clicked into the evidence chain. The hard drive was now listed as recovered at 8:39 p.m., 12 minutes before Maya's arrest. Yesterday, the log said 8:42. Before that, it had said 9:07. Whoever was editing the file was not just altering evidence. They were correcting mistakes as they found them. Rachel printed the access history and felt her stomach go cold. Her own username appeared 3 times. 2:37, 232A, 232.9A. She had been asleep at those times. Alone in her townhouse in Oak Park, her phone charging beside a half-empty glass of water. Her laptop closed on the kitchen table. "Damn it," she whispered. Behind her, someone said, "Problem?" Rachel turned. Assistant Clerk Martin Kessler stood with a stack of folders against his chest. 62. Careful. Balding. The sort of courthouse employee who had survived 3 chief judges and more political scandals than he cared to discuss. Rachel lowered her voice. "Martin, did you process any late uploads on the Williams file?" His eyes moved once toward the camera above the copier. "You should ask through official channels." "That bad? That visible?" Rachel felt the answer settle heavily. Kessler stepped closer, pretending to sort folders. The assignment request came before the case number. "I saw that." "No," Kessler said quietly. "You saw the edited version." Rachel stopped breathing for a second. He pulled a pink routing slip from between 2 folders and placed it face down beside the printer. "I found it in the reject tray. It shouldn't exist." Rachel did not touch it immediately. "Who signed it?" Kessler looked at her. "Whitmore's chambers." A printer hummed nearby. Somewhere down the hall, an older clerk laughed at something ordinary, and the sound seemed to belong to another country. Rachel picked up the slip. The timestamp was clear. The request to assign Judge Edward Whitmore to Maya Williams's emergency hearing had been entered 36 minutes before Maya's arrest was officially logged. Rachel folded the slip once and slid it into her file. Kessler gave her a hard look. "You didn't get that from me. I never saw you. That won't save either of us." "No," Rachel said. "But it may save the record." She left through the service corridor instead of the main elevator. In the women's restroom on the 3rd floor, she locked herself in the last stall and stood there with both hands pressed against the folder. For 11 years, Rachel Monroe had believed in institutions because the alternative was too exhausting. She knew they were flawed. Everyone over 40 with a courthouse badge knew that. But flawed was different from captured. Captured meant the forms still worked, the seals still stamped, the judges still wore robes, and the whole machine kept moving while the truth was quietly replaced page by page. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then she answered. "Monroe," a man's voice said. "You found the routing slip." Rachel froze. "Who is this?" "Victor Hayes." She looked toward the restroom door. "How did you get this number?" "I'm retired, Miss Monroe. Not helpless. I don't know you." "No. But you know your credentials were used at 2:13 this morning." Rachel said nothing. Victor continued. "If you report it through internal channels, the report will vanish. If you confront Whitmore, you'll be removed. If you do nothing, Maya Williams goes down, and you become the signature on the shovel." Rachel closed her eyes. "What do you want?" "Pull the raw login metadata before they overwrite it." "I don't have that access." "You do if you know which basement office still runs the old server mirror." Rachel opened her eyes slowly. She did know. Almost nobody used it anymore, but it existed for disaster recovery. A relic from before the last modernization contract. Victor said, "You have until close of business. And if I refuse, then you'll spend the rest of your career explaining why you saw the first crack and looked away." The line went dead. Rachel stood there for several seconds, listening to the old pipes tick inside the wall. At 4:40 p.m., she entered the server mirror room with a borrowed keycard and a paper cup of coffee she did not drink. The technician on duty, a tired man in his 50s named Dale, barely looked up from his crossword. "Needs something. Counselor. Case access audit. Williams file. Official?" Rachel placed a signed request form on his desk. It was official enough to make him uncomfortable and vague enough to make him hurry. Dale seethed and tooped. The raw metadata loaded. Rachel leaned closer. The 213 login had not come from her office, her home, or any federal device assigned to her. It came from a judicial administrative terminal 2 floors above, Whitmore's chambers. Dale stopped chewing his gum. Rachel printed the log. "You didn't see that." Dale's eyes stayed on the screen. "See what?" Rachel took the pages, folded them inside the routing slip, and walked out before her hands could start shaking. That evening, she drove through the rain to a pay lot near the detention center. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, watching headlights smear across the windshield. Then she called Leonard Voss. When he answered, She said, "I need to see Maya Williams tonight." Voss was quiet for a beat. As her prosecutor, Rachel looked at the folder on the passenger seat. "No," she said. "As the first person in my office who can prove someone is framing her." The line went silent. Then Voss said, "Bring copies." Rachel looked up at the detention center's concrete walls. "I already made 3. Rachel Monroe arrived at the detention center at 8:15 p.m. with 3 copies of the metadata log hidden inside a plain accordion folder. Leonard Voss met her in the visitor lobby, rainwater still beating on the shoulders of his old coat. "Do you understand what happens if you're wrong?" Voss asked. Rachel looked past him toward the locked doors. "I'm more worried about what happens if I'm right." They were placed in a legal interview room with Maya 15 minutes later. Maya sat across the table in gray detention clothes, the small bandage beneath her eye, already dark at the edges. She looked tired, but not defeated. Rachel slid the first copy across the table. "Your case file was altered using my credentials." Maya did not touch the paper yet. "From where?" "Whitmore's chambers." Voss swore under his breath. Maya finally picked up the log. Her eyes moved quickly down the page. Time, 2:13 a.m. 7 documents deleted, 3 added. "Who has admin access from chambers?" Rachel answered carefully. "The judge, his senior clerk, and judicial IT if granted temporary permission." Maya looked up. "Temporary permission leaves a trace." Rachel nodded. "I checked. No IT ticket." Voss leaned forward. "So Whitmore or someone inside his chambers used your credentials to rebuild the evidence packet." "Not rebuild," Maya said. "Repair. They framed me fast, then corrected the weak points after the fact." Rachel opened the second folder. "There's more. The assignment request for Whitmore came 36 minutes before your arrest was officially logged." The room went quiet. Voss stared at the page. "That makes the hearing prearranged. It makes the judge part of the trap," Maya said. Rachel looked at her. "You don't sound surprised." "I stopped being surprised when he branded my face in open court and expected applause." Voss rubbed his forehead. "We need an emergency motion." "No," Maya said. Both attorneys looked at her. "If we file now, Whitmore buries it under procedural review. We need motive. We need the money." Rachel hesitated, then pulled out the prison occupancy report Victor had sent through Voss. Victor Hayes said, "To start here." Maya took the report and placed it beside the metadata log. The pieces began aligning in her mind like numbers on a ledger. North River Correctional Holdings had projected rising detainee occupancy before bail sweeps occurred. Whitmore's courtroom had supplied the detention orders. The sealed case edits protected the pattern. The private money moved somewhere behind it all. "The machine is simple," Maya said. "High bail creates detention. Detention creates pressure. Pressure creates plea deals. Plea deals create bodies in beds. Bodies in beds create revenue." Rachel's face tightened. "And the poorer the defendant, the faster the pressure works." Maya nodded. "That's why bail was the weapon." Voss looked ill. "You're saying a federal judge was feeding people into private detention for profit." "I'm saying he wasn't doing it alone." Rachel pointed to the occupancy report. North River projected a 12% increase in pretrial detainees, the same quarter Whitmore issued his highest detention orders. "Against whom?" Maya asked. Rachel already knew why the question mattered. Mostly black defendants, some Latino defendants, all adults, most charged with offenses that normally allowed lower bail or supervised release. Maya stared at the table. "That's the civil rights pattern." Voss exhaled slowly. "And your drug charge?" "A costume," Maya said. "Something ugly enough that the public stops asking questions." Rachel looked at the bandage on Maya's cheek. "And the courtroom?" That was Whitmore sending a message to anyone else thinking about opening the books. For a moment, no one spoke. Outside the interview room, keys jingled. Somewhere in the corridor, an older guard laughed softly at a radio joke, and the ordinary sound made the room feel even colder. Voss tapped the report. "We still need proof of payment." "Victor said there are shell companies," Maya said. "Judicial education funds, nonprofits, vendors, consulting fees." Rachel's eyes narrowed. Court modernization grants. Maya looked at her. Rachel continued. Whitmore pushed a court modernization initiative 5 years ago. New case management software. New detention analytics. Vendor selection was sealed under security privilege. Who won the contract? Rachel swallowed. A company called Civic Path Systems. Voss flipped through his notes. I've seen that name. Maya's voice lowered. Civic Path was in the contract map I was building before the arrest. It shares infrastructure consultants with North River. Rachel sat back, stunned. So, the software that recommends detention risk may be tied to the truther to the company profiting from detention. Not recommends, Maya said. Justifies. Voss looked between them. Tell me what to file. Nothing public yet, Maya said. File for preservation only. All court assignment logs, bail recommendation data, vendor contracts, detention transport records, and access metadata. That'll alert them. They're already alerted. This makes destruction look intentional. Rachel nodded slowly. I can request an internal preservation hold from the U.S. attorney's side. Can you do it without your supervisor killing it? Rachel's answer came after a pause. Not through normal channels. Maya almost smiled. Good. Normal channels are how they built this. Voss gathered the copies. And the bank key. Maya looked at Rachel, then at Voss. Victor gave me access to a box. He said it's a doorway to the black file. Rachel's face changed. Where? I don't know yet. But the number on the key matches old Midwest Trust boxes. They closed most branches after the merger. Voss nodded. I know one still operating near LaSalle. Rachel stood. Then we go tonight. Voss looked at her. A federal prosecutor and a public defender walk into a bank after hours with a key from a retired FBI agent. That sounds like the beginning of a disciplinary hearing. Maya's voice stayed calm. Or the end of Whitmore's. Before leaving, Rachel paused at the door. Maya, if this is as big as we think, they won't just attack the case. Maya met her eyes. I know. They'll attack everyone touching it. Maya glanced toward the camera above the door, then back to Rachel, then touch it. Carefully. At 10:06 p.m., Rachel Monroe and Leonard Voss drove through the wet streets of downtown Chicago toward the last Midwest Trust branch, still holding private vault records from before the merger. Behind them, 2 headlights followed at a steady distance through the rain. Neither Rachel nor Voss noticed. But inside the detention center, Maya lay awake on the steel bench, staring at the ceiling, knowing exactly what Whitmore's people would do next. A machine that large did not stop when exposed. It started grinding faster. Midwest Trust sat on LaSalle Street, between a shuttered cigar shop and a steakhouse where judges, union lawyers, and aldermen had been making quiet deals since the Reagan years. By the time Rachel Monroe and Leonard Voss arrived, the lobby lights were dim, and the rain had thinned to a cold mist. Voss parked at the curb and checked the mirror. That black sedan has followed us since the detention center. Rachel did not turn around. You're sure? I'm old, not blind. Across the street, the sedan idled beneath a broken street lamp. Rachel took the envelope from her coat pocket. Then, we don't give them time to think. Inside, the night manager, a narrow-faced man named Paul Denning, looked unhappy to see them. He became more unhappy when Rachel showed her federal identification. This vault access requires appointment and ownership verification, he said. Voss placed the bank key on the counter. Then, verify. Denning looked at the number and went still. Rachel noticed. Problem? No, he said too quickly. This box is old. Pre-merger. Open it. I'll need authorization. Rachel leaned closer. You have a federal prosecutor, a defense attorney, and a key tied to an active obstruction matter. Choose your next sentence carefully. Denning swallowed and led them downstairs. The vault smelled of metal, dust, and cold air. Denning pulled the box from a low drawer and placed it on a steel table. Voss inserted the key. It turned with a soft click. Inside was a black ledger, a flash drive, and a sealed envelope addressed in block letters. For Maya Williams, if they come for her, Rachel whispered. Victor knew. Voss opened the ledger first. The pages were filled with dates, initials, case numbers, bail amounts, facility transfers, and coded payments. Some entries had names written fully in the margin. Edward Whitmore, Daniel Price, Civic Path Systems, North River Correctional Holdings. Voss stared at the first page. This is not a doorway. This is the door. Rachel inserted the flash drive into an air-gapped laptop she had borrowed from Voss. A folder opened with scanned contracts, court assignment logs, occupancy reports, and foundation transfers. One subfolder was labeled audio. Rachel's hand hovered over the trackpad. Voss stopped her. Not here. A sound echoed above them. Footsteps. Denning turned pale. I locked the front door. Voss closed the ledger and slid it inside his coat. Rachel removed the flash drive and pocketed the envelope. The footsteps grew louder on the stairs. Rachel looked at Denning. Back exit? There's an alley door through records. Move. They hurried through a narrow corridor lined with storage boxes. Behind them, a man's voice called down from the stairwell. Mr. Denning? We just need a minute. Denning froze. Voss grabbed his sleeve. Son, people who say that at night in a bank never need just a minute. They reached the alley door. It opened into rain, and the smell of garbage, wet brick, and exhaust. Voss stepped out first. Then Rachel, then Denning. The black sedan's headlights snapped on at the end of the alley. Rachel did not run. She walked fast, head low, toward Voss's car on the next block. A second vehicle turned in from the far end. Voss muttered, "They're boxing us." Rachel pulled out her phone and called the only person she trusted enough to risk. Deputy Reed, this is Rachel Monroe. I need federal marshals at LaSalle and Quincy. Now. A pause. Then Reed said, Are you in danger? Yes. Stay visible. That may be difficult. The first sedan rolled closer. The passenger window lowered halfway. Voss shoved Rachel behind a delivery dumpster just as something cracked against the brick wall beside them. Not a gunshot. A thrown object. A warning. A voice from the car said, Hand over the files, counselor. Rachel's breathing stayed controlled, but her hand shook inside her coat pocket. Voss leaned close. When I say move, cross to the steakhouse. That's your plan? They have cameras and old men who love calling police when trouble reaches their valet stand. The sedan door opened. Voss shouted, Move! They crossed the street in the rain. A horn blared. Rachel nearly slipped but kept the envelope tight against her ribs. The steakhouse doorman, a large man in his 60s wearing a red coat, saw them coming and immediately stepped forward. You folks all right? Rachel flashed her ID. Federal matter. Call 911. And keep your cameras running. The doorman looked past her at the approaching men from the sedan. His face hardened with the calm of someone who had seen enough Chicago nights to recognize the difference between drunk customers and hired fear. You heard the lady, he said to the valet. Call it in. Sirens came 3 minutes later. The men from the sedan were gone by then. At 11:34 p.m., Rachel and Voss sat in a back booth of the steakhouse with 2 untouched coffees between them. Deputy Reed stood near the entrance, speaking with responding officers. The ledger lay open on the table beneath Rachel's coat, hidden from the room. Voss turned a page and stopped. What? Rachel asked. He pointed to a line item. Case initials. Bail amount. Facility transfer. Payment code. Then a handwritten note. EW approved before hearing. Rachel looked sick. EW. Edward Whitmore, Voss said. Rachel opened the sealed envelope with care. Inside was a single printed memo from Victor Hayes and a photocopied transcript excerpt. Rachel read aloud softly. If you are reading this, then Whitmore has moved from containment to exposure. The ledger alone shows pattern and motive. The audio shows intent. Use both together, or he survives. Voss looked at her. We need Maya. Rachel nodded. And we need to get this copied before sunrise. Across town, inside the detention center, Maya was brought to the phone at midnight. Rachel's voice came through low and urgent. We found the ledger. Maya closed her eyes for 1 second. Names? Yes. Money? Yes. Whitmore. Rachel paused. All over it. Maya opened her eyes. Then listen carefully. she said. Do not file it yet. Do not email it. Do not hand it to anyone wearing a friendly face. Make physical copies, split them, and keep the original moving. Maya, there's audio. The phone line hummed. For the first time that night, Maya's voice changed. What does he say? Rachel looked down at the flash drive in her palm. We haven't played it yet. Good, Maya said. Play it only when the whole room can hear it. Rachel understood. The black file had begun to open, but not enough. Not yet. Maya hung up and looked through the scratched glass toward the guard station. Somewhere above her, Edward Whitmore still believed he had buried her under bail, ink, and blood. He had no idea the ledger was already out in the rain. By 1:20 a.m., Rachel Monroe had learned there were only two kinds of silence in Chicago: the honest silence of sleeping streets and the manufactured silence of people who were afraid to be heard. She and Leonard Voss drove in separate cars after leaving the steakhouse. Voss carried the ledger. Rachel carried the flash drive and Victor's envelope. Deputy Reed had insisted on following them for 6 blocks before turning toward the courthouse to file a report that would probably make someone important very unhappy by sunrise. Rachel did not go home. She drove to her sister's vacant condo in Printers Row, a place used mostly for business trips and holiday overflow. No courthouse Wi-Fi, no office cameras, no helpful colleagues appearing at the wrong moment. She parked 2 blocks away, walked in through the rear entrance, and took the stairs to the 5th floor. Inside, she locked the door, checked the windows, and placed the flash drive on the kitchen table, as if it might explode. Her phone rang before she touched it. Unknown number. Rachel answered without speaking. A man said, "You took something that doesn't belong to you." Rachel looked toward the dark window. Who is this? Someone giving you a chance to remain a prosecutor instead of becoming evidence. She ended the call. It rang again immediately. She powered the phone off and removed the SIM card with a paperclip. For several seconds, the condo was quiet except for the refrigerator hum and rain tapping against the glass. Then came a soft knock at the door. Rachel froze. No one knew she was here. She turned off the kitchen light and moved silently toward the peephole. The hallway outside was empty. Another knock came. Lower this time. Not from the door, but from the window behind her. Rachel spun around. Victor Hayes stood on the fire escape in the rain, one hand on the railing, his coat dark with water. Rachel opened the window with shaking hands. Are you insane? Victor climbed in slowly, breathing harder than he wanted her to notice. At my age, probably. How did you find me? You drove like someone trying not to be followed. That made you easy to follow. That's not comforting. It wasn't meant to be. Victor looked at the flash drive on the table. Did you play it? No. Maya said not to. Good. She's thinking clearly. Rachel folded her arms tightly. People are calling me. They'll do more than call. As if answering him, headlights swept across the condo wall from the street below. A car had stopped near the alley entrance. Victor moved to the window, looked down, then stepped back. Packet. Rachel grabbed the flash drive and envelope. Where are we going? To Voss. I thought splitting up was safer. It was, until they found you first. They left through the fire escape. The metal stairs were slick, the air sharp with lake wind. Halfway down, Rachel heard glass break above them. Someone had entered the condo. She looked at Victor. He did not look surprised. At street level, they slipped into the alley and moved toward a waiting cab Victor had somehow arranged without using his phone. The driver, a woman in her late 50s with silver hair tucked under a Cubs cap, glanced at them in the mirror. Bad night? She asked. Victor shut the door. Worse for the people behind us. The cab pulled into traffic. Across town, Maya lay awake in her cell before a guard came for her again. This time, it was not for a legal visit. It was a transfer notice. Where? Maya asked. County medical hold, the guard said, avoiding her eyes. I didn't request medical. Order came down. Maya stood slowly. From whom? The guard did not answer. That was answer enough. They cuffed her hands and ankles and moved her through a service corridor she had not used before. No cameras in 2 sections. Bad lighting. One elevator out of service with a handwritten sign. Maya counted every detail. At the garage entrance, Deputy Reed appeared from behind a concrete pillar. "Stop," he said. The two transport officers turned. Reed held up a clipboard. "Transfers canceled." One officer frowned. "Since when?" "Since I called the hospital and they had no intake order. Since I checked the marshal log and found no transport authorization. Since somebody used a dead supervisor's code to generate the request." The younger officer's hand twitched near his belt. Reed noticed. So did Maya. Reed's voice dropped. "Don't." For a long moment, the garage felt balanced on a wire. Then the older transport officer stepped back. "We just got the order." "I'm sure you did," Reed said. "Now uncuff her from the leg chain and take her back." Maya looked at Reed as they turned her around. He did not meet her eyes until they were out of earshot. "You were right," he said quietly. "They're trying to move you off the record." "Why help me?" Reed's mouth tightened. "Because I watched a judge put a stamp into a bleeding woman's face, and half the room pretended they needed permission to be human." Maya held his gaze. "That answer will cost you." I figured. At 3:05 a.m., Victor, Rachel, and Voss met in the back office of a 24-hour copy shop near Greektown. Voss had arrived first with the ledger wrapped in a grocery bag. The owner, a retired court interpreter named Mrs. Alvarez, locked the front door and turned off the neon open sign without asking questions. Voss looked at Rachel's wet coat and Victor's scraped hand. "They found you?" Rachel placed the flash drive on the counter. "They found the condo." Victor nodded toward the copier. "Then we move faster." They made 12 paper copies of the ledger's key pages and burned 6 encrypted drives from the flash copy. Mrs. Alvarez labeled each drive with boring names. Taxes, recipes, church, insurance, photos, old music. Rachel almost laughed when she saw them. Mrs. Alvarez gave her a stern look. "People ignore boring things, dear." At 4:10 a.m., Rachel finally played 5 seconds of the audio, just enough to confirm the voice. Edward Whitmore came through the small speaker, calm and unmistakable. "High bail breaks them faster. Once they sit long enough, they plead. Once they plead, the beds stay full." Rachel stopped the recording with her hand shaking. Voss whispered, "My God," Victor said. "God had nothing to do with it. Men built this." By sunrise, the copies were moving in 6 directions. One to a retired judge Victor trusted, one to a civil rights firm in Milwaukee, one to a newspaper editor who still answered his own phone, one to Deputy Reed, one to Voss's safe, one hidden where Rachel alone could reach it. Maya received the message at 7:30 a.m. through Voss, during a brief legal call. "We copied everything," he said. "Anyone hurt?" "Not yet." "That means they failed." Voss hesitated. "They tried to transfer you?" "Yes." "Jesus." "No," Maya said, looking at the morning light crawling across the detention wall. "That was Whitmore." She hung up and sat very still. Someone wanted her silent, but now too many people had heard the first 5 seconds of the truth. By 9 a.m., Edward Whitmore's chambers had gone quiet in the way powerful rooms go quiet when everyone inside them is waiting for someone else to panic first. Whitmore stood at the window overlooking Dearborn Street, one hand in the pocket of his robe, the other holding a porcelain coffee cup he had not touched. His senior clerk, Thomas Greer, stood near the door with a folder pressed against his chest. "The transfer failed," Greer said. Whitmore did not turn. "I know. Deputy Marshal Reed blocked it." "I know that too," Greer swallowed. "Then Reed is a problem." Whitmore finally looked back. His face was calm, but the calm no longer reached his eyes. "No, Thomas. A problem is something you solve quietly before anyone notices it exists. Reed is now a witness. There is a difference." Greer lowered his voice. "Do you want me to call Price?" Whitmore's gaze sharpened. "Absolutely not. No calls to Daniel Price. No calls to North River. No calls to anyone whose name appears anywhere near a contract. From this moment forward, everyone behaves as if this is a normal federal narcotics matter involving a disgraced woman who got caught. That may be harder now." Whitmore set the coffee down. "Why?" Greer opened the folder. "Someone accessed the old Civic Path vendor files last night." Whitmore stared at him. "Who?" "We don't know yet. The request routed through a maintenance archive. Whitmore walked slowly back to his desk. Find out. Greer hesitated. Judge, if Williams had help, she has a public defender, a frightened prosecutor, and a retired bureau ghost who should have stayed buried. Whitmore picked up a pen and tapped it once against the desk. That is not help. That is noise. But when Greer left, Whitmore remained standing. Noise had a way of becoming testimony. Across the city, Rachel Monroe sat in the back room of Mrs. Alvarez's copy shop with Leonard Voss and Victor Hayes. The blinds were closed. The front sign still said closed. On the table between them sat the ledger, 6 copied packets, and a small black recorder connected to an old laptop that had never touched the internet. Victor looked at Rachel. Play the whole thing. Rachel's hand hovered over the keyboard. Once we hear it, we can't pretend we don't know. Voss rubbed his eyes. I stopped pretending around the time a federal judge assaulted my client in court. Rachel pressed play. At first, there was only faint room noise, the low hum of air conditioning, and the distant clink of glassware. Then Daniel Price's voice came through, smooth and amused. The county numbers won't carry the quarter unless detention holds above projection. Whitmore answered immediately, calm and impatient. Then file more holds. Price laughed. You say that like I sign the orders. No, Whitmore said. I say it because I do. Nobody in the copy shop moved. The recording continued. Price said, the reform people are watching bail now. They love their little charts. Charts don't matter. Whitmore replied. Fear matters. High bail breaks them faster. Once they sit long enough, they plead. Once they plead, the beds stay full. Rachel closed her eyes. Victor's jaw hardened. Voss whispered, there it is. But the recording was not finished. Price said, and if someone starts asking why your courtroom feeds North River facilities at twice the regional rate, Whitmore's voice dropped. Then we make them unreliable, corrupt if possible, criminal if necessary. Nobody listens to a dirty investigator. Rachel stopped the audio. The room seemed smaller after that. Voss leaned back, pale. That's intent. That's conspiracy. Victor nodded. And motive. Rachel stared at the laptop. We still need authentication. I can get that, Victor said. How? The original recorder is part of the black file. This is only a copy. Rachel looked up. Where is the original? Victor did not answer. Voss gave a bitter laugh. I'm starting to hate that pause. Victor folded his hands. The original is safe, but not accessible without Maya. Rachel frowned. She's detained. She has something Whitmore doesn't know about. The key? Victor nodded. The bank box gave us the ledger. It also gave us a claim ticket. Maya has the number in her head now, whether she realizes it or not. Voss looked confused. What claim ticket? Victor turned the envelope over. On the inside flap, almost invisible unless held to light, was a string of digits pressed into the paper. Rachel leaned closer. You hid a number inside the envelope? No. The accountant did. He was careful. Voss shook his head. Careful people in this story seem to die or disappear. Victor's expression did not change. That's why we hurry. At the detention center, Maya received Rachel and Voss in the legal room just before noon. Reed personally escorted her and stayed outside the door, arms crossed, watching both ends of the corridor. Rachel placed a handwritten summary of the recording on the table. We heard him. Maya read in silence. When she reached the line, nobody listens to a dirty investigator. She stopped. For a moment, the room disappeared, and she saw Whitmore's face above her in court, the red stamp in his hand, his voice telling the world she was inventory, not rage, not impulse, method. He had done to her exactly what he said he would do. Maya looked up. Who else heard it? Me, Voss, Victor, and Mrs. Alvarez, Rachel said. Too many for Whitmore to erase quietly. Not enough for court. Voss nodded. We need the original. Maya turned to Victor, who had been sitting silently in the corner. Where is it? Victor looked older in the detention light. In a private evidence locker tied to the old investigation. The locker requires 2 things: the claim number and biometric release from the person named on the final sealed authorization. Who? Victor held her gaze. You. Maya stared at him. I never signed anything. No. But when I realized you were following the same trail I followed, I amended the authorization through a lawful evidence preservation request. If I vanished, the material could be released only to you. Rachel looked stunned. You put the original evidence under Maya's control before she was arrested? I put it under the control of the one person Whitmore would underestimate. Maya sat back slowly. For the first time, the shape of Victor's plan became clear. He had not simply helped her after the trap. He had built a narrow bridge before she knew she needed one. Voss leaned forward. Can she access it from custody? No, Victor said. But we can petition for supervised evidence retrieval. Rachel shook her head. Whitmore will deny it. Maya looked at the summary again. Then, we don't ask Whitmore. Everyone turned to her. The assault in court created a conflict. His chambers altered the file. His assignment request predates my arrest. We file an emergency motion for reassignment and preservation before the chief judge, sealed, with enough proof to make ignoring it dangerous. Rachel considered it. If the chief judge is clean. If she isn't, Maya said. We'll find out quickly. Voss let out a slow breath. And if Whitmore moves before the motion is heard? Maya looked toward the door, where Reed's shadow stood through the frosted glass. Then he proves our argument for us. That afternoon, the motion was filed in paper form, hand-delivered by Reed to the chief judge's clerk, and copied to no electronic docket. Rachel signed a sworn declaration stating her credentials had been used without authorization. Voss signed the emergency request. Victor attached a one-page affidavit saying the original evidence existed and could authenticate the recording. At 4:47 p.m., Chief Judge Helen Markham issued a sealed order removing Whitmore from all direct rulings in Maya's case pending review. At 4:52 p.m., Edward Whitmore learned he had lost control of the courtroom, and for the first time in years, the machine hesitated. Edward Whitmore did not shout when he read Chief Judge Helen Markham's sealed order. That would have comforted his clerk. Shouting meant pressure escaping. Instead, Whitmore sat behind his desk, read the order twice, and placed it neatly beside his untouched coffee. Thomas Greer stood near the door, pale and waiting. Whitmore removed his glasses. Who hand-delivered it? A deputy marshal. Name? Reed. Whitmore nodded once, as if confirming a minor weather report. Of course. Greer shifted. Judge Markham also ordered preservation of all assignment records, chamber access logs, detention recommendations, and vendor communications tied to Williams. Whitmore looked toward the windows. Outside, Chicago traffic moved through a slow gray evening. Vendor communications, he repeated. Greer said nothing. Whitmore turned back. Call Daniel Price. You said no calls. I said no calls before they took my courtroom. Greer hesitated. From here? Whitmore's eyes hardened. Do I look like a fool? 10 minutes later, Whitmore stood in the private library behind chambers, using an old landline reserved for judicial emergencies and men who believed rules were written for other people. Daniel Price answered on the second ring. Tell me this is contained. It was, Whitmore said. That isn't an answer. The woman has help. Price was quiet for a moment. How much? Enough to get me removed from direct rulings. Price cursed softly. Then she has documents. She has fragments. Fragments sink ships when the hull is already cracked, Judge. Whitmore's voice lowered. Listen carefully. If North River's name appears in a live filing, you become visible. I've spent 20 years making sure I'm not visible. Then spend the next 24 hours proving it. Price exhaled. What about the old Hayes file? Whitmore did not answer quickly enough. Price's tone changed. You told me that was gone. It was sealed. That is not gone. Whitmore gripped the receiver. Find out where it is. Across town, Maya Williams stood in a secure evidence release room beneath the federal building, wrists free for the first time in 3 days. She had been transported under Chief Judge Markham's sealed order, escorted by Deputy Reed, Leonard Voss, Rachel Monroe, Victor Hayes, and 2 marshals who looked deeply unhappy to be involved in anything historic. A technician scanned the paperwork. This is unusual. Maya looked at him. So was my bail hearing. The man decided not to respond. The evidence locker was behind 2 steel doors and a biometric panel. Victor stood beside Maya, with the claim number written on a yellow legal pad. He looked tired, but his eyes were clear. "You understand," he said quietly. "Once this opens, nobody in this room gets to be neutral." Rachel answered before Maya could. "Neutral ended when they used my credentials," Voss added. "Mine ended when the judge turned my client's face into evidence." Deputy Reed said nothing, but he stood by the door with his arms folded. The technician entered the claim number. The screen flashed once. Authorized recipient, Maya Williams. Maya placed her thumb on the scanner. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then, the lock clicked. The drawer slid open. Inside sat a black file box, sealed in clear evidence plastic, tagged under an old federal preservation number. On top was a small digital recorder, a notarized chain of custody affidavit, 3 original financial summaries, and a handwritten note from Victor dated 9 years earlier. Maya did not touch anything at first. Victor watched her. "That's the black file." Rachel leaned closer to the plastic. "This is enough to authenticate the audio?" Victor nodded. "And enough to prove the ledger wasn't fabricated." Voss looked at the tag. "Who notarized the chain?" Victor's expression grew darker. "An accountant named Samuel Rusk. He disappeared from public life 2 weeks after signing it." "Disappeared how?" Rachel asked. "Retired suddenly. Moved south. Stopped using credit. The usual American way of vanishing when you know too much and still want to breathe." Maya picked up the sealed file box carefully. "What's on the recorder besides the price conversation?" Victor was quiet for a moment. Maya looked at him. He said, "Whitmore naming the method." They moved to a secure review room. The recorder was connected to an evidence playback system under camera. The technician verified the seal, read the chain number aloud, and started the recording. The same voices filled the room. Daniel Price first, then Whitmore. They listened to the section Rachel had already heard, but the original was cleaner. Every pause, every glass clink, every small breath landed with brutal clarity. Then the recording continued beyond the copied excerpt. Price said, "The advocacy crowd will call it racial targeting." Whitmore gave a dry laugh. "They always do. Let them. By the time they prove pattern, half the defendants have pled, the facilities are paid, and the public has moved on." Price asked, "And if an investigator gets close?" Whitmore replied, "Make the investigator dirty. Drugs, money, misconduct, whatever the public understands fastest. The truth doesn't need to be disproven. It only needs to be made inconvenient." No one in the room moved. Maya felt the words enter her like cold water. Not because they shocked her, because they explained everything. Rachel whispered, "He described your frame." Victor's face looked carved from stone. 9 years ago. Voss sat down slowly. This was always the playbook. The technician stopped the recording only after the final timestamp. Maya turned to Rachel. "Can Markham admit this?" Rachel's voice was steady now. "At minimum, she can order a full evidentiary hearing. Once this is authenticated, DOJ Public Integrity gets involved whether anyone likes it or not." Reed looked toward the camera in the corner. "Make copies before we leave." The technician blinked. "That requires authorization." Reed held up the sealed order. "Read paragraph 7. The man read it, swallowed, and started copying. By 8:30 p.m., the black file existed in 4 certified evidence duplicates. One went to Chief Judge Markham's chambers. One went to Rachel under sealed prosecutorial disclosure. One went to Voss. One remained in federal custody. Victor refused to hold a copy. "I carried it long enough," he said. As they prepared to leave, Voss received a call. He listened for less than 10 seconds before his expression changed. "What is it?" Maya asked. He put the phone on speaker. A voice from his office assistant came through, shaken. "Mr. Voss, 2 men came with a subpoena and a search order. They're taking boxes." Voss closed his eyes. "Signed by whom?" The assistant hesitated. "Judge Whitmore." Rachel looked at Maya. "He's removed from your case." Maya's face hardened. "Then he's not trying to win the case anymore." Victor finished the thought. "He's trying to find out what we have." Reed stepped toward the door. "We need to move." But Maya did not move immediately. She looked at the black file copy in Voss's hands, then at Rachel, then at Victor. "No," she said quietly. "Now we let him see just enough." Voss stared at her. Enough for what? Enough to make him think there's only one copy. Rachel understood first. A decoy. Maya nodded. "Whitmore built this whole trap because he thought I was desperate. Let him keep thinking it." Victor's tired eyes sharpened. "You want him to chase the wrong file. I want him to touch it," Maya said. On record. By midnight, a decoy packet sat in Voss's office safe, thin enough to look incomplete and valuable enough to tempt a frightened man. Deputy Reed arranged a discreet camera through a contact who owed him a favor. Rachel filed a sealed notice with Markham that Whitmore had issued an order after removal. Victor disappeared into the city with no explanation. Maya was returned to detention before dawn. As Reed escorted her back to the cell block, he asked, "You really think he'll go for the decoy?" Maya glanced toward the gray morning, pressing against the narrow window. "Men like Whitmore don't fear lies," she said. "They fear losing control of the truth." At 6:12 a.m., Judge Edward Whitmore's private investigator entered Leonard Voss's office with a copied search order and a pair of gloves. The hidden camera caught everything. At 6:12 a.m., the hidden camera in Leonard Voss's office recorded a man in a navy raincoat step through the door with a copied search order in one hand and black gloves on both. He did not look like a thief. That was the point. He looked like paperwork given legs. The man showed the order to Voss's assistant, who had been warned to cooperate and say very little. She stood by her desk with her purse in both hands while he walked past her into Voss's private office. "Sir, Mr. Voss isn't here," she said. "I won't need him." His voice was calm, almost bored. He moved directly to the wall safe behind the framed law school diploma, which told everyone watching later that he had been given more than a general instruction. He had been given a location. From a parked van half a block away, Deputy Reed watched the live feed on a small tablet beside Rachel Monroe and Leonard Voss. Rain clicked softly against the windshield. Voss looked as if he wanted to climb out of the van and break the man's jaw. Reed said, "Stay in the seat. That's my office, and that's our evidence." On the screen, the man opened the safe using a code printed on a folded slip of paper. Voss stared. Rachel glanced at him. "Who knew that code?" "My assistant, me, and the court, when we filed sealed property access last year." Reed's mouth tightened. "So, Whitmore's people pulled it from sealed court records." The man removed the decoy packet, photographed each page with his phone, then placed 2 pages into his coat and returned the rest to the safe. Voss leaned forward. "He stole pages." Rachel's voice was cold. "No." He completed the chain. At 6:29 a.m., the man left Voss's office. Reed called 2 marshals waiting around the corner. "Let him walk 10 feet, then take him." On the tablet, the man stepped onto the sidewalk, opened a black umbrella, and turned toward the curb. 2 marshals closed in from opposite directions. His face changed only when he saw Reed step from the van. Reed held up his badge. "Federal obstruction inquiry. Hands where I can see them." The man tried to reach inside his coat. Reed's voice dropped. "Don't be the reason this gets louder." The man froze. They found the stolen pages, the phone photographs, and a text message sent 12 minutes earlier to a blocked number. Package. Located. Incomplete. Williams may still have original. Rachel looked at the screen capture and felt something settle into place. "He'll call her now." Voss frowned. "Who?" "Maya." At 8:10 a.m., Maya was brought into the legal interview room at the detention center. She expected Voss. Instead, she found Edward Whitmore on the video monitor. Seated in chambers, robe on, face composed for a camera that no longer belonged to him, a guard stood by the door. Court-authorized conference. Maya sat slowly. "This judge was removed from my case." Whitmore smiled. "Temporary administrative review. Nothing more. You sent a man into my attorney's office." His smile thinned. "You should be careful with accusations. You should be careful with search orders after removal." For the first time, annoyance cut through his polished face. "Maya," he said, using her first name as if it were a favor. "You are in far more danger than you understand." "No, I understand it clearly." "Then understand this. Whatever Victor Hayes has told you, whatever scraps Rachel Monroe thinks she found, none of it will survive. Admissibility, chain of custody problems, authentication questions, privacy violations, judicial privilege. By the time I am finished, your little conspiracy will look like desperation from a woman facing life in prison." Maya rested her cuffed hands on the table. "You sound tired." Whitmore leaned closer to his camera. "You are alone in a detention center. Your accounts are frozen. Your reputation is dead. Your lawyer is out of his depth. The prosecutor who helped you will be under internal investigation by lunch." Maya said nothing. Whitmore's voice softened, and that made it uglier. "Take the plea. 10 years. You serve less with good conduct. You disappear quietly, and people who helped you keep their careers." Maya looked at him for a long moment. "What happens if I don't?" Whitmore's eyes hardened. "Then, I bury you." The words hung there. Maya remembered Victor's warning. "Do not prove you're innocent first. Prove why they needed you guilty." She leaned toward the screen. "Then bury me in public." Whitmore stared at her. Maya continued, voice even. "Put every motion on the record. Every altered login. Every sealed assignment request. Every detention order tied to North River. Every call to Daniel Price. Every search you signed after you lost authority. Bury me where everyone can watch you dig." His jaw tightened. "You don't know what I have," she said. Whitmore gave a controlled laugh. "I know exactly what you have. Fragments, copies, old grudges from a retired agent. A ledger no one can authenticate." Maya saw the mistake. He knew about the ledger, not the original recording, not the full black file. She lowered her eyes just enough to let him think he had struck something real. "If that's true, why are you calling?" Whitmore did not answer. "You're not here to threaten me," Maya said. "You're here to measure what I know." His face went still. Maya nodded once. "Now you know less than you thought." Whitmore reached forward, likely to end the call. But she spoke first. "You made one mistake in that courtroom." "Only one?" he asked. "You thought humiliation was control." The screen went black. When Maya returned to her cell, Voss was waiting by phone. His voice carried a tension he could barely hide. "We got him. The investigator. The stolen pages. The text. Good. He also photographed the decoy. Better." "Maya? Whitmore contacted you?" "Yes." "What did he offer?" "A grave. With paperwork." Voss was silent for a beat. "And what did you say?" Maya looked at the narrow window above the cell door, where a pale strip of Chicago morning had finally pushed through. "I told him to dig it in public." By noon, Rachel filed an emergency supplement with Chief Judge Markham. Unauthorized search, stolen defense material, post-recusal contact, and witness intimidation. Reed attached the arrest report. Voss attached a sworn statement. Victor added one sentence through counsel. "The original evidence remains secure." At 3:40 p.m., Markham scheduled a public evidentiary hearing for Monday morning. That was the first time Whitmore's name appeared in a proceeding he did not control. And across Chicago, from courthouse offices to private boardrooms, people who had spent years surviving under his shadow began making quiet decisions about whether loyalty was still worth the cost. Monday morning arrived with a hard blue cold over Chicago, the kind of cold that made older men button their coats all the way to the throat and made courthouse smokers stand closer to the stone walls for shelter from the wind. By 8:30 a.m., the federal courthouse lobby was already crowded. Reporters filled the security line. Legal analysts spoke into small microphones near the entrance. Courtroom sketch artists waited with flat cases tucked beneath their arms. Retired attorneys who had spent half their lives in that building stood quietly near the elevators, not speaking much, because they knew the difference between a scandal and a reckoning. This one felt like a reckoning. Maya Williams arrived through the secure entrance in the custody of Deputy Reed and 2 marshals. She wore a dark suit Voss had fought to retrieve from property. Pressed but not perfect. A thin, healing line remained beneath her eye where the case file had cut her. The red ink was gone, but everyone who had seen the footage remembered it. Reed unlocked her cuffs before they reached the courtroom door. Maya looked at him. "Is that allowed?" "Judge Markham's order," he said. Then, after a pause, "and common decency." Maya adjusted her sleeves. "Careful, deputy. That sort of thing can become a habit." Reed almost smiled. "I'm willing to risk it." Inside, courtroom 14A was packed wall to wall. Chief Judge Helen Markham presided from the bench, silver-haired, severe, and still in a way that made people lower their voices without being asked. She was 71, a former prosecutor, and had a reputation for disliking drama almost as much as she disliked people who created it and then hid behind procedure. Leonard Voss stood at the defense table with 3 binders, 2 legal pads, and the expression of a man who had slept badly, but prepared well. Rachel Monroe sat at the government table, no longer pretending she was detached. Victor Hayes sat in the first row behind Maya, cane across his knees, eyes forward. Edward Whitmore entered through the side door at 858A. For the first time since Maya had seen him, he was not on the bench. That changed everything. He wore a dark suit instead of his robe. Without the height of the judge's chair behind him, without the seal above his head, without the gavel within reach, he looked smaller. Not weak, exactly, but human in a way he had always worked to avoid. His attorney, a polished white-collar defense lawyer named Grant Ellison, guided him to the witness table. The room watched. Whitmore did not look at Maya. Judge Markham struck the bench once. "This court is convened for an evidentiary hearing concerning allegations of judicial misconduct, evidence tampering, unauthorized case access, witness intimidation, and potential obstruction related to United States v. Williams. Let me be clear at the outset. This is not a press conference, not a political hearing, and not a performance. It is a federal proceeding. Anyone who forgets that will be removed." No one moved. Markham looked toward Voss. "Mr. Voss." Voss rose. "Your Honor, we are prepared to show that Miss Williams was framed because she was examining financial and procedural links between detention orders, private prison interests, and judicial conduct. We will show altered logs, unauthorized access, falsified evidence timing, improper assignment, manipulation, and an attempted theft of defense materials after Judge Whitmore had been removed from direct authority over this case." Ellison stood immediately. "Your Honor, these are outrageous allegations dressed up as civil rights theater." Markham looked at him over her glasses. "Mr. Ellison, if you interrupt opening statements again, you will make them longer. Sit down." Ellison sat. A faint breath moved through the room. Voss continued, calmer now. "At the center of this hearing is a simple question. Was Maya Williams arrested because she committed a crime, or because she got too close to crimes committed by people with power?" Markham turned to Rachel. "Miss Monroe." Rachel stood. Her voice was steady, but Maya noticed the tightness in her hands. "Your Honor, the government has an obligation to seek justice, not convictions. I reviewed the Williams file and discovered that my credentials were used without authorization to alter evidence records after Miss Williams was arrested. Raw metadata shows that access originated from a terminal inside Judge Whitmore's chambers. I have submitted sworn declarations and supporting logs under seal." Whispers stirred in the gallery. Markham's eyes moved toward Whitmore. "There will be silence." The first witness was Martin Kessler, the assistant clerk from the records floor. He walked to the stand slowly, one hand pressed to his lower back. A man who looked as if he had spent 30 years carrying boxes and secrets. Rachel examined him. "Mr. Kessler, did you find a routing slip related to Judge Whitmore's assignment to Miss Williams's case?" "Yes." "When was that assignment request entered?" Kessler looked at the paper before him. 36 minutes before Miss Williams's arrest was officially logged. The room seemed to tighten. Rachel asked, "Is that normal?" "No, ma'am." "Is it possible for a judge to request assignment to a case that does not officially exist yet?" Kessler looked toward Whitmore, then back at Rachel. "Not through normal channels." Ellison rose for cross-examination and tried to make Kessler look confused. "Outdated. Too old for modern systems." Kessler listened politely, then answered each question with the stubborn patience of a man who had fixed everyone's filing mistakes since before Ellison passed the bar. When Ellison asked, "Isn't it possible you misread the routing slip?" Kessler replied, "Counselor, I have been reading courthouse paperwork since you were wearing cheaper suits. I did not misread it." A few people in the gallery coughed to hide laughter. Markham did not smile, but she allowed it. Next came Deputy Reed. He testified about the failed medical transfer, the dead supervisor's code, the bagged red stamp, and the hidden camera in Voss's office. His voice was plain and unpolished, which made it harder to dismiss. Ellison tried to corner him. "Deputy Reed, are you trained in judicial procedure?" "No." "Digital forensics?" "No." "Then why should this court rely on your conclusions?" Reed looked at Judge Markham, then back at Ellison. "Because when a detained woman is ordered moved to a hospital that never requested her, by a supervisor who's dead, after she accused a judge of corruption, I don't need a computer science degree to know someone is lying." The courtroom fell silent again. Maya lowered her eyes for a moment, not from weakness, but to contain the force of what she felt. She had spent days inside concrete walls, wondering who would risk being seen standing too close to her. Now, one by one, people were choosing the record over their own safety. That was how systems changed. Not all at once, not cleanly, one witness at a time. Then Voss stood and called Victor Hayes. Victor rose from the gallery with his cane, walked to the stand, and took the oath in a voice roughened by age and old anger. Voss approached carefully. "Mr. Hayes, were you formerly employed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation?" "Yes." "In what capacity?" "Public corruption and civil rights investigations." "Did you investigate Judge Edward Whitmore?" Victor looked directly at Whitmore for the first time. "Yes." "When?" 9 years ago." "And what did you preserve from that investigation?" Victor's hand rested on the rail of the witness box. "A black file." The words moved through the courtroom like a door opening in a dark house. Ellison stood. "Objection." Markham's gavel came down once. "Overruled for now." "Mr. Voss, proceed carefully." Voss turned toward the evidence table, where the certified black file copy sat sealed in plastic. Maya felt the room shift toward it. Whitmore finally looked at her. For the first time, he did not look contemptuous. He looked uncertain. Voss said, "Your Honor, with the court's permission, we are prepared to authenticate the original recording." Judge Markham looked at the sealed file, then at Whitmore, then at Maya. "Proceed," she said. And in the silence that followed, Edward Whitmore reached for a glass of water with a hand that was no longer steady. Leonard Voss approached the evidence table with the careful steps of a man carrying more than paper. The sealed black file sat beneath the courtroom lights, its plastic surface reflecting the faces watching it. Reporters, clerks, marshals, attorneys, and one former judge who had spent decades believing the truth could be delayed until it became useless. Voss turned to the technician assigned by Chief Judge Markham. "Please identify the exhibit." The technician adjusted his glasses. "Certified duplicate of preserved federal evidence file. Original chain number H19447. Contents include financial summaries, docket comparisons, transfer records, foundation payment records, and one digital audio recording with notarized chain of custody affidavit." Voss nodded. "Was the original recording authenticated?" "Yes." "Metadata, device signature, and preservation history are consistent. No evidence of alteration." Grant Ellison rose sharply. "Your Honor, we object to the characterization of this material before foundation has been fully tested." Judge Markham looked at him. "Your objection is noted. Sit down." Ellison sat, but not comfortably. At the witness stand, Victor Hayes kept his hands folded over the cane in his lap. He looked at the file the way older men sometimes look at a grave they had spent years avoiding. Voss faced him. "Mr. Hayes, did you personally preserve the original recording?" "Yes." "Why?" Victor glanced once at Maya, then back to the court. "Because I knew if it disappeared, men like Edward Whitmore would keep wearing robes while other people paid for his sins." The courtroom held its breath. Voss let the answer sit before continuing. "Your Honor, the defense moves to play the authenticated recording." Ellison stood again. "Your Honor, this is inflammatory, prejudicial, and potentially taken out of context. Judge Markham's eyes narrowed. Mr. Ellison, if the recording is out of context, you will have every opportunity to establish that on cross-examination. The objection is overruled. Voss turned toward the technician. Play it. The first sound was ordinary. Air conditioning. Glass touching wood. A man clearing his throat. That ordinary beginning somehow made everything worse. Then Daniel Price's voice filled the courtroom, smooth and almost cheerful. The county numbers won't carry the quarter unless detention holds above projection. A pause. Then Edward Whitmore's voice, unmistakable and calm. Then file more holds. Price laughed. You say that like I sign the orders. No, Whitmore said. I say it because I do. No one moved. At the government table, Rachel Monroe lowered her eyes, not in shame, but in recognition. She had heard the excerpt before, yet hearing it here, under federal seal, in front of the man who had said it, changed its weight. The recording continued. Price said, The reform people are watching bail now. They love their little charts. Whitmore answered, Charts don't matter. Fear matters. High bail breaks them faster. Once they sit long enough, they plead. Once they plead, the beds stay full. A sound moved through the gallery. Not loud enough to be a gasp, not organized enough to be a murmur. It was the sound of people understanding something they did not want to understand. Maya sat still at the defense table. She did not look at Whitmore. She listened to his voice, explaining her destruction, as if it were a business process. On the recording, Price asked, And if someone starts asking why your courtroom feeds North River facilities at twice the regional rate, Whitmore replied, Then we make them unreliable, corrupt if possible, criminal if necessary. Nobody listens to a dirty investigator. That sentence struck the room harder than the first. Several reporters began writing so quickly their pens scratched audibly across paper. Voss looked toward Maya. She gave no reaction. The recording continued into the part no one outside the small evidence room had heard in open court. Price said, The advocacy crowd will call it racial targeting. Whitmore gave a dry laugh. They always do. Let them. By the time they prove pattern, half the defendants have pled, the facilities are paid, and the public has moved on. Judge Markham's face did not change, but her hand tightened around the pen on her bench. Price asked, And if an investigator gets close? Whitmore's answer came with brutal patience. Make the investigator dirty. Drugs, money, misconduct, whatever the public understands fastest. The truth doesn't need to be disproven. It only needs to be made inconvenient. The technician stopped the recording. For a few seconds, the courtroom seemed to lose the ability to breathe. Then Voss opened the black file. He placed the first page beneath the document camera. On the courtroom, monitors appeared a detention summary. Dates, bail amounts, facility transfers, projected occupancy rates, and revenue variance. Voss said, Your Honor, this page shows North River's projected occupancy increase, submitted before the detention orders that made those projections profitable. He placed another page down. This shows Civic Path Systems, the detention analytics vendor, sharing consultants with a North River subsidiary. Another page. This shows payments moving through the Whitmore Judicial Education Foundation. Another page. This shows case assignment irregularities, including Miss Williams's assignment request before her arrest was officially logged. Ellison stood, but no words came out at first. Judge Markham looked at him. Do you have an objection, counsel? Ellison glanced at Whitmore. Whitmore was staring at the monitor. His face had gone pale, but the worst thing was not his color. It was his stillness. The man who had once thrown a file at Maya's face and pressed a red stamp into her wound now looked as if movement itself might confirm he was falling. Ellison finally said, We request a recess. No, Maya said. Her voice was not loud, but the room heard it. Judge Markham turned to her. Miss Williams, you will address the court through counsel. Maya rose slowly. Voss started to object, then stopped. Maya looked at Markham. Your Honor, I understand. But this man used a courtroom to brand me as guilty before I was heard. He used bail as a weapon. He used false evidence to bury an investigation. If there is a recess now, People will call it confusion. They will call it procedure. They will call it anything except what it is. Markham studied her for a long moment. And what is it, Miss Williams? Maya turned toward Whitmore for the first time. It is the record finally catching up to him. The courtroom fell silent again. Rachel stood. Your Honor, the government moves for immediate preservation of all materials related to Judge Whitmore, North River Correctional Holdings, Civic Path Systems, and the Whitmore Judicial Education Foundation. We also request referral to the Department of Justice Public Integrity Section. Ellison snapped. This is outrageous. Rachel looked at him. No. Outrageous was pretending this was a drug case. Victor Hayes lowered his head slightly, as if some burden had finally shifted from his shoulders to the place it belonged. Judge Markham struck the bench once. The motion for preservation is granted. Referral is ordered. The court will also order immediate review of Miss Williams's detention status. In light of evidence presented, Whitmore suddenly stood. This proceeding is improper. Every head turned. His voice shook, not with fear alone, but with the disbelief of a man who had forgotten what it felt like to be interrupted. Markham's eyes fixed on him. Mr. Whitmore, sit down. The title landed like a sentence. Not, Your Honor, not Judge. Mr. Whitmore. He remained standing for 1 second too long. Then, slowly, he sat. Maya watched him lower himself into the chair. She did not smile. There was nothing small enough in her for that. The black file remained open beneath the courtroom lights, page after page waiting its turn. And for the first time since the gavel had priced her freedom at $1 million, the room no longer belonged to Edward Whitmore. For 20 seconds after Chief Judge Markham called him Mr. Whitmore, Edward Whitmore sat very still. The courtroom understood the change before anyone explained it. Titles mattered in buildings like this. Robes mattered. The height of a bench mattered. The words, Your Honor, were not just courtesy. They were armor. And in one quiet sentence, Markham had stripped that armor away in front of everyone who had once feared it. Grant Ellison leaned close to his client and whispered, Do not speak unless I tell you. Whitmore did not appear to hear him. On the evidence monitor, the black file remained open to the page showing payments routed through the Whitmore Judicial Education Foundation. The numbers were not dramatic by themselves. 10,000 here, 25,000 there. Consulting reimbursement, speaker honorarium, advisory stipend. American corruption rarely arrived in sacks of cash. It came dressed as paperwork, tax compliance, and respectable language. Rachel Monroe stood again. Your Honor, the government further requests immediate suspension of all access privileges belonging to Edward Whitmore, Thomas Greer, and any chamber staff connected to unauthorized case activity pending forensic review. Ellison rose. Your Honor, my client has not been charged with a crime. Markham looked down at him. Your client's voice has just been heard discussing how to frame an investigator with drugs, money, or misconduct. His chambers appear connected to altered evidence logs, improper case assignment, and an unauthorized search order issued after recusal. If you wish to argue that continued system access is harmless, do so carefully. Ellison sat down. Maya watched Whitmore's hand move toward the water glass again. This time, his fingers bumped the rim. A few drops spilled onto the table. Small things told the truth first. Markham turned to the clerk. Contact the Chief Marshal. I want federal security on this courtroom, and all chamber files secured immediately. At the back of the room, 2 deputy marshals stepped out. Whitmore finally spoke. You cannot do this. His voice was lower than before, but everyone heard it. Markham's gaze settled on him. Mr. Whitmore, you are represented by counsel. I strongly advise you to use him. This is a staged attack, Whitmore said, rising halfway from his chair. A disgraced defendant, a bitter retired agent, and a prosecutor trying to save her own career have manufactured a spectacle. Voss stood. Your Honor. Markham raised one hand. Let him finish. Whitmore looked at the room then, really looked at it, as if expecting the old instinct to return. The bowed heads, the nervous clerks, the attorneys, who softened their voices when he frowned. But nobody lowered their eyes now. Not the reporters, not the marshals. not the elderly lawyers seated in the gallery with folded hands and grave faces. He turned toward Maya. "You think this makes you clean?" he said. Maya did not move. "You think one recording turns you into a martyr?" Maya stood slowly. "No. It turns you into evidence." A murmur moved through the room before Markham struck the bench once. "Order." Whitmore's face tightened. "You have no idea what men like me have protected this city from." Victor Hayes spoke from the witness stand before anyone could stop him. "Men like you always call your appetite protection," Ellison snapped. "Your Honor, I object to commentary from the witness." "Sustained," Markham said. Then she looked at Victor. "Mr. Hayes, one more outburst and you will step down." Victor nodded. "Understood." The side doors opened. 4 federal agents entered in dark suits, not tactical gear, but the authority in their movement changed the air immediately. Their badges were clipped to their belts. Their faces showed no appetite for drama. Behind them came an evidence response team carrying sealed containers and cameras. The lead agent approached the bench and handed a document to the clerk. Rachel read the header from where she stood, and her expression changed. DOJ, Public Integrity Section. Markham reviewed the document. "Let the record reflect that federal agents have appeared with warrants pertaining to chamber records, communication devices, and financial documents connected to Edward Whitmore, Daniel Price, North River Correctional Holdings, Civic Path Systems, and the Whitmore Judicial Education Foundation." Ellison turned sharply toward Whitmore. "Did you know about this?" Whitmore did not answer. That silence did what the recording had begun. It separated him from his last defender. One of the agents stepped toward Whitmore. "Edward Whitmore, please stand." Ellison rose quickly. "My client is not required to." The agent remained calm. "Sir, we have a warrant authorizing seizure of personal devices currently in his possession. We are also instructed to escort Mr. Whitmore for questioning pursuant to the ongoing obstruction investigation." Whitmore looked at Markham. "Helen." The first name was a mistake. Too familiar, too desperate. Markham's face did not soften. "You will comply with federal officers in my courtroom." He stood, not with dignity. Not really. Dignity requires surrender to truth. Whitmore stood like a man whose body had been ordered to perform a role his mind had not accepted. The agent removed his phone, a second phone from his inside jacket pocket, his wallet, and a small keyring. Each item was bagged, labeled, and logged aloud. Maya listened to the inventory with an almost unbearable stillness. 3 days earlier, her own belongings had been reduced to numbers in plastic bags. Her watch, wallet, earrings, and phone taken as if they were proof of guilt. Now Whitmore's possessions received the same treatment under the same fluorescent lights of procedure he had used against others. Law, when honest, had no imagination. It simply returned what men sent out. Then, Thomas Greer appeared at the side entrance, escorted by another marshal. His tie was crooked, and his face was gray. "Your Honor," the marshal said. Mr. Greer was attempting to remove documents from chambers. Markham closed her eyes for one brief moment, not in surprise, but in fatigue. "Secure him separately." Greer looked at Whitmore. "Judge, I was following instructions." Whitmore snapped. "Be quiet." That was the final sound of loyalty breaking. Greer's eyes changed. The fear remained, but something else entered it now. Self-preservation. Rachel noticed immediately. So did Maya. Markham ordered a recess, but no one moved at first. The room had the stunned feeling of a church after a confession no one expected to hear aloud. Whitmore turned to leave with the agents, then stopped near the defense table. For a moment, he stood close enough that Maya could see the age in his skin and the fine tremor in his jaw. The red stamp mark was gone from her cheek, but the healing cut remained. He looked at it. Maya said nothing. Whitmore opened his mouth, perhaps to threaten, perhaps to explain, perhaps to say something that might still make him feel taller than the woman he had tried to break. Nothing came out. The lead agent touched his elbow. "This way, Mr. Whitmore." The title landed again. Mr., not Judge. Whitmore's knees seemed to loosen beneath him. His hand reached for the edge of the table, missed, caught the chair instead, and for one terrible second, The man who had once ruled the courtroom swayed in full view of the cameras, clerks, attorneys, and citizens he had underestimated. He did not collapse dramatically. There was no thunderous fall, no cinematic crash. He sank into the chair as if the bones of his authority had been removed, all at once. A medical officer moved forward, but Whitmore waved him off with a weak, angry motion. Maya watched without satisfaction. She had imagined justice many times during those sleepless hours in detention. She had imagined a door opening, a charge dismissed, a headline corrected, maybe even an apology that would never come. But she had not imagined how small a powerful man could look when the room stopped believing in him. Markham's voice cut through the silence. Court is in recess for 30 minutes. Miss Williams is to remain uncuffed and in consultation with counsel. No one leaves with documents except under federal inventory. The gavel came down once. This time, it sounded different. Not like a weapon, like a lock turning. As the courtroom began to stir, Rachel walked to Maya's table and placed one hand lightly on the black file. "You were right," Rachel said. Maya looked at Whitmore being helped toward the side door. "About what?" Rachel's voice was quiet. He wasn't afraid of being accused. He was afraid of being recorded. Maya touched the bandage beneath her eye. "No," she said. He was afraid someone he considered powerless would live long enough to open the file. 1 year later, the rain stopped before sunrise. Chicago woke beneath a clean gray sky, the kind that made the old stone buildings look washed rather than worn. On Dearborn Street, traffic moved slowly past the federal courthouse, past the news vans, past the coffee carts and office workers carrying paper cups in gloved hands. For most of the city, it was an ordinary Thursday morning. For Maya Williams, it was the first morning in a year that did not feel like a fight. She stood across from the courthouse in front of a restored brick building that had once housed a bail bond office, then a vacant tax preparation shop, then nothing at all. Now the windows were polished, the front steps repaired, and a bronze sign had been mounted beside the door. The Maya Williams Center for Equal Justice. Below the name, smaller letters read, "Free legal representation for the wrongfully detained, overcharged, and silenced." Maya looked at the sign for a long moment. Leonard Voss stood beside her with 2 coffees in a cardboard tray and a scarf wrapped badly around his neck. "You know," he said, "when I told you to sue the city, I did not mean spend the settlement fixing its conscience." Maya took one of the coffees. The city didn't have one. That's why it needed help. Voss grunted. "You always this cheerful before ribbon cuttings? I dislike ceremonies. You founded a legal center with your name on the wall. I lost that argument. You lost it to everyone." That was true. Rachel Monroe had insisted the name mattered. Victor Hayes had said people needed a door they could remember. Deputy Reed had said a building named after a living witness was harder for politicians to quietly forget. Even Mrs. Alvarez from the copy shop had told Maya, in the firm voice of a woman who had raised 3 sons and corrected federal judges' Spanish pronunciation for 30 years, that modesty was not always a virtue. So the name stayed. Across the street, the courthouse doors opened, and a small group of attorneys came down the steps. Some looked toward Maya and quickly looked away. Others nodded. One older black defense lawyer paused, lifted 2 fingers in quiet respect, and continued walking. Maya returned the nod. A year had changed the city, but not gently. Edward Whitmore had resigned before formal removal could be completed. The resignation did not save him. Federal prosecutors charged him with obstruction, conspiracy, honest services, fraud, and civil rights violations under color of law. Daniel Price took a plea after 6 weeks and provided records that widened the investigation into 3 states. Civic Path Systems collapsed under subpoenas. North River Correctional Holdings lost 2 major contracts before Christmas. Thomas Greer cooperated. That surprised no one except Whitmore. The review of old cases was still ongoing. Dozens of adults had already received new hearings. Some had been released. Some had their convictions reduced. Some simply had the truth entered into the record after years of being told the record was finished with them. Maya had learned that justice rarely arrived like thunder. More often, it arrived as corrected paperwork, reopened files, hearing dates, exhausted lawyers, and people walking out of buildings carrying their belongings in clear plastic bags. Deputy Alan Reed approached from the corner, wearing a dark suit that looked uncomfortable on him. He had retired from the Marshal's service 3 months earlier after what his official paperwork called administrative friction. Maya had read between the lines. "You clean up well, Deputy," she said. "Retired," Reed corrected. "And this tie is choking me." Voss looked at it. "Because you tied it like a search warrant." Reed ignored him and looked at the building. "Good place. You ready for the board meeting?" Maya asked. "I thought I was just here for coffee. You accepted a board seat." "I accepted because Rachel said there would be coffee." Rachel Monroe arrived exactly on time, carrying a folder under one arm and wearing the same serious expression she had worn the day she brought Maya the first altered log. She had left the U.S. Attorney's office after the hearings and joined the center as litigation director. The official statement said she wanted to pursue justice from a different angle. Privately, she had told Maya she was tired of asking permission from rooms that confused caution with morality. Rachel handed Maya the folder. "First, intake list." Maya opened it. Names, case numbers, detention dates, bail amounts, facilities, families, employers, medical notes, lost homes, lost years, adult lives interrupted by a machine that had mistaken poverty for guilt and silence for consent. Her throat tightened, but she did not let it show. "How many today?" she asked. 27 scheduled. More calling. Voss sipped his coffee. "We're going to need more lawyers," Rachel said. "We're going to need more coffee." Reed looked across the street at the courthouse. "Think they'll hate seeing this place every morning?" Maya followed his gaze. The courthouse stood where it always had, broad and stone-faced, its flags moving lightly in the wind. It had not changed shape. Buildings rarely confessed, but people had begun crossing the street now. That mattered. "They don't have to hate it," Maya said. "They just have to see it." A black sedan pulled up at the curb, and Victor Hayes stepped out slowly, cane first. He looked thinner than the year before, but his eyes were still sharp enough to make younger men stand straighter. "Mrs. Alvarez climbed out behind him with a box of pastries balanced in both hands. Victor looked up at the sign and shook his head. "You let them put your name on it." Maya smiled faintly. "I was outvoted, as you should have been." Mrs. Alvarez handed the pastry box to Voss. "Eat something before you all start making speeches and pretending lawyers can live on caffeine." "No speeches," Maya said. Rachel gave her a look. "There is absolutely a speech." Maya seethed. At 10 o'clock, the sidewalk filled with people. Former clients, current lawyers, retired clerks, reporters, neighbors, ministers, union workers, and older residents who had watched the Whitmore hearings on television and seen something they had suspected for years, finally spoken aloud by a federal judge's own voice. Maya stood at the small podium near the front steps. For a moment, she saw the other courtroom again. The gavel, the file flying toward her face, the stamp pressed into her wound. Whitmore's voice calling her inventory. She felt again the cold of the holding cell, the weight of cuffs, the strange loneliness of knowing the truth before anyone else was willing to say it. Then she looked at the faces in front of her, and the memory loosened. "This building used to send people toward jail," Maya said. "Today, it begins sending them toward counsel." The crowd quieted. For years, powerful people used complicated words to hide simple wrongs. They called fear public safety. They called poverty risk. They called detention procedure. They called profit efficiency. And when anyone asked too many questions, they tried to make that person look guilty. She paused. "I know something about that." A soft ripple moved through the crowd. Maya continued, her voice steady. "This center exists because justice should not depend on who can afford to be believed. It exists for every adult who was told to take a deal because fighting would cost too much, for every person held on bail designed to break them, and for every family that sat outside a courtroom wondering why the truth seemed to have no lawyer." Victor lowered his head slightly. Rachel's eyes shone, but she did not look away. Maya placed one hand on the folder Rachel had given her. "We cannot undo every loss. We cannot return every year. But we can reopen doors that were sealed too early. We can put names back into records. We can make sure that when the system reaches for someone in silence, someone else is already listening. The ribbon was cut without ceremony after that. Maya insisted. Inside, the center smelled of fresh paint, printer paper, and new coffee. Desks lined the main floor. A conference room had been named after Martin Kessler, the clerk who saved the routing slip. A secure evidence room carried no name at all. Only a plain steel door and better locks than Voss said any non-profit had a right to own. On the wall near reception, behind glass, rested a copy of the first page of the black file. Not the recording, not the ugliest words, just the page that proved the pattern. Bail, beds, money, names. Truth did not need decoration. Near noon, after the first appointments began, Maya stepped outside alone with her coffee. It was still warm. Across the street, sunlight broke through the clouds and touched the courthouse steps. Voss came to the doorway behind her. "You all right?" Maya watched a man in a work jacket enter the center with a folder held tightly in both hands. "No," she said honestly, "but I'm useful." Voss nodded. "That may be better." For a while they stood without speaking. Then Maya looked at the courthouse one last time and thought of Whitmore, of his gavel, of his voice, of how certain he had been that a woman with no visible power could be priced, marked, processed, and forgotten. He had been wrong about all of it. For years, they used the law like a weapon. All it took to destroy them was one woman willing to open the file. The lesson of Maya Williams's story is that corruption survives when good people stay silent, and injustice grows stronger when power is never questioned. Maya was humiliated, framed, and treated as if her truth did not matter. But she refused to let fear define her. Her courage reminds us that justice is not always handed down from a bench. Sometimes it must be carried by ordinary people who choose to speak, document, and stand firm when the system turns against them. One honest voice may seem small at first, but when it refuses to disappear, it can expose an empire built on lies. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. If it touched your heart, I would truly love to hear your thoughts on the storytelling, the emotional pacing, or whatever stayed with you after listening. Every comment you share helps make the next stories more honest, moving, and meaningful. And if you have a powerful or meaningful story of your own, please do not hesitate to send it to the channel. It may become the next story to touch and inspire thousands of others. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.